I've got a range of equipment here that we would use for taking a soil sample in the field. This is nothing specialist, it's just basic equipment that hopefully everybody would have at home. The first thing is a plastic bucket. The bucket needs to be plastic rather than metal because metal can actually alter the results. So the other things I've got here is just a regular garden trowel. Garden trowel needs to be clean as well because you don't want any soil from anywhere else, because that also could potentially affect the results that you might get. So you need to make sure you clean it each time you take a sample. I've also just got here a regular spade as well, and again the spade needs to be clean and rust free because again that potentially could have an impact on the soil results. So you need to make sure it's clean before you start. So you need to take a minimum of 25 small samples across the field to get an average so that you can send that away for soil analysis. The best way to do this is to walk a W shape across the field, and you stop 25 times and you take your small subsample from each one of those 25 locations. If you're working in a much smaller area, you could probably reduce that down to say between 8 and 12. You're going to use the spade to strip off the turf layer, just the turf, and none of the topsoil, or as little of the topsoil as you can. And then you can either use the trowel or the spade to dig down around 7.5 centimetres worth of soil, and you're going to transfer that soil into the bucket. The amount of soil that you collect at each of those 25 locations doesn't need to be very much. I would say around the size of a jam jar's worth. Once you've got all 25 samples in the bucket, you're going to give them a really thorough mix with a trowel, and then you're going to take the subsample that you send away to the soil lab from that bucket of mixed soil, put it in your Ziploc bag, make sure you mark the Ziploc bag so you know exactly which field the sample has come from, and then you can post it off to the soil lab. All soil labs will have a different amount of soil that they require, so it's worth just double checking with your soil lab as to exactly how much soil they will require, but normally it's around 250 to 500 grams worth of soil that you need to send away to the lab. If you've got a field that has got various different vegetation across it, so say one area of the field is very wet, another area is very dry, and there's obvious differences in the vegetation or the soil, it's a good idea to take separate samples from those different discrete areas in the field. So you would go through exactly the same process, but just focusing on the area where the vegetation is different, or where the area is wet, or where there's a steeper slope. So you may end up with multiple samples from the same field, but the idea is to pick up the subtle differences in the vegetation, or where the area is wet, because the likelihood is the soil is going to be subtly different there, and you want to have an understanding about the soil across the whole field.